Monday, January 1st, 1940. Finnish forces relentlessly harassed troops from the 44th Soviet Division in the area of Suomussalmi. The Finnish Osato Kontula Brigade, composed of 350 men, attempts to block the march of Soviet soldiers along the narrow Rot Road, while Colonel Salazvo's division attacks the rear guard and ambushes the Russians. Both in Germany and in Britain, there are clear signs that it will be a long war. Hitler orders compulsory military service for all German university students and warns that, if necessary, members of the 8 million strong Hitler Youth who are old enough will be mobilized. At the same time, the British government prepares to incorporate 2 million men between 20 and 27 into the services. The French government orders the re-establishment of railway links with the Iberian Peninsula following the interruption of services for a number of years due to the Spanish Civil War. In the Sea War, U-58, commanded by Herbert Kupich, sinks the Swedish merchant ship Lars Magnus Trozelli. Tuesday, January 2nd. The Battle of Salla begins in the Soviet-Finnish War. Although the Finns are outnumbered, the Soviets encounter strong resistance. In the German-occupied Polish territories, Hans Frank, the Governor-General, prohibits the publication of obituaries and any other references to people who have disappeared with the view to covering up the number of assassinations being committed. Nazi terror is enforced by a curfew, forcing all inhabitants to be inside their houses from 8 at night onwards. Despite the fact that the mass executions and the transport of prisoners in cattle wagons is a daily occurrence, the Polish people are not easily intimidated, and throughout the country, posters and graffiti denounce the atrocities committed by the invaders. At sea, non-stop bad weather seriously disrupts the submarine war. The intense activity that Donitz has enforced on his U-boats in these early months of the war has caused many to require repairs in the shipyards. Wednesday, January 3rd. Soviet troops try to break through the blocks that Finnish forces have mounted on the roads. The Finns use all means to intimidate the enemy. Planes drop thousands of leaflets on the city of Leningrad, telling its inhabitants about the number of casualties in the Red Army and the Russian tanks and planes that have been destroyed. Hitler receives a letter from Mussolini in which the Italian dictator expresses his disagreement with Germany's treaty with Stalin. Both you and I have always agreed that the Soviet Union is our common enemy. The German-Soviet non-aggression pact is a betrayal of Nazism and fascism, and I advise you to keep the peace in the West and seek a solution for the problem of German living space in the East, Mussolini writes. In the United States, President Roosevelt substantially increases the defense budget. Meanwhile, German intelligence has obtained information about British purchases of war materials from the Americans. In the Sea War, U-58, commanded by Herbert Kupich, sinks the Swedish merchant ship Svarten, and U-25, captained by Werner Hartmann, docks in the neutral Spanish port of Cadiz for supplies. Thursday, January 4th. In Finland, the harassed Soviet troops on the Rat Road continue trying to break out of the siege imposed by the Finnish forces. Constantly ambushed and with hardly any ammunition or food left, the Russian soldiers launch desperate attacks which make them easy prey for the enemy. To date, the Red Army has lost 27,000 men, while Finnish losses are less than 500. Meanwhile, from Oslo, the 1st Volunteer Brigade begins its march to Finland, and the Swedish F-19 unit prepares to travel to its base at Rovaniemi with its Gluster Gladiator planes to intervene in the war. In Berlin, Hitler issues a decree giving the German state control over all war industries and names Hermann Göring plenipotentiary of the war economy in preference to Walther Funk, an economist who, among other things, organized the requisition of Jewish goods and Czech gold reserves. In the Sea War, British shipping continues to suffer at the hands of German U-boats, and the Admiralty is forced to count the cost of having neglected to develop anti-submarine measures because it did not consider the submarine a dangerous weapon of war. Friday, January 5th. In the Battle of Suomussalmi in Finland, the final offensive begins against the penned-in Russian troops. The Finns attack from all sides and mine the possible Soviet escape routes. The Russians send horses in advance to act as sappers and detect the mines in order to enable them to retreat more easily. But the surrounding Finnish units wipe them out of their trenches. Following the arrival in Finland of the first contingent of volunteers from Sweden, the Soviet Foreign Minister, Vyacheslav Molotov, accuses the Swedish and Norwegian governments of violating their neutrality, which he says will have consequences. In the United States, the Federal Communications Commission demonstrates for the first time FM radio, which constitutes an important advance in communications, having a wider broadband. While in Italy, Mussolini's government begins to give out the first ration books. In Britain, tensions in the executive lead to a cabinet reshuffle under Prime Minister Chamberlain. Leslie Hoare Belisha, a Jew who fought in the First World War, is replaced as Secretary of State for War by Oliver Stanley. Saturday, January 6th. In the Soviet-Finnish War, there is heavy fighting along the Rat Road between the Soviet 44th Division and Finnish forces. The number of Red Army casualties continues to rise, and General Alexei Ivanovich Vinogradov orders a general withdrawal. Thousands of terrified Russian soldiers flee and are easily ambushed by the Finns with their superior knowledge of the terrain. The Soviet tanks that have not been destroyed withdraw at full speed, and the attempts by the Air Force to cover them are unsuccessful as Finnish units hide in the thick, extensive forests. Returning to Berlin following his Christmas and New Year holidays, Hitler undergoes a medical examination by Dr. Theodor Morell. The tremor and increasing lack of movement of his left arm show more clearly the symptoms of Parkinson's disease. For its part, the British government informs the Norwegians of its intention to mine their waters in order to divert ships sailing to Germany further out to sea, where they can be more easily attacked. The First Lord of the Admiralty, Winston Churchill, travels to France to try to convince the French government to send commandos to mine the main rivers of Germany. The French don't like the plan, fearing the Germans would reply in kind.